Welcome to my home. Welcome to my Christmas tree. Beautiful Christmas tree. Welcome to Fireside Chat number 3, where we discuss freedom. And specifically, I speak the freedom that they talk about in the scriptures. Freedom talks about through the Messiah being free to act and choose for ourselves, free to choose good or free to choose evil. And I want to talk about how that's what they talk about in the scriptures. That's completely different from what they talk about when they talk about freedom in the world. When they talk about freedom, they often talk about freedom to act with no consequence. The freedom to act with no consequence is not the same as the freedom to make moral choices. Moral choices are important. The consequence of those moral choices either gives us freedom or gives us bondage. And let me explain why. Even the person in the most vile of, let's say, an example of a hitman for the mafia. He works as a hitman, kills people, gets away with it. He has freedom to choose. He has freedom to make choices. Let's just put it this way. He has freedom to make choices. He gets up, he chooses whether or not he wants to eat eggs or fried toast and bacon, or he can choose to, spend his time doing X or spend his time doing Y or spend his time doing something else. So a hitman would have the ability to make choices. At the same time, that's not the same kind of freedom they're talking about when they talk about moral freedom or the freedom that they talk about in the scriptures. The freedom that they talk about in the scriptures is the freedom to make good choices. When we are faced, and it's important, the only way that we can be free to make good choices is by making good choices, and that brings true freedom. And let me explain why. If you have a choice between good and evil, I consider that a moral choice. A moral choice is where you have one thing that's right and one thing that is wrong. And how you act upon that will determine whether you're free or in bondage. The way that works is, let's just say you make a good choice. And that good choice will ultimately, over time, provide more good choices and more good choices and more good choices. So life is not just a choice between A and B. The life is often a choice between A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. So, for example, when we're choosing careers, we can choose to spend our time hunting this type of company, hunting that type of company, or we can, in our house, we can, to use this analogy, we can either spend our time fixing the doors, we can either spend time, painting the walls or doing all kinds of things. So there are lots of different things that we can spend our time doing on, and different choices that we can make. And if we have a choice that's wrong amongst them, then when we make that wrong choice, it will ultimately lead to more wrong choices, more bad choices, more wrong choices. And the way this works is, if you ever get into a situation or heard of a situation where people have perhaps one career option where they're going to be going to London and making all this extra money, and another career option where they might want to stay put and spend more time with the family. That is where you have two good options, two right choices. Both of them might be good. And think of the other opposite end, where you have somebody who is addicted to drugs, and they either have the choice of feeding their habit or going through painful withdrawal symptoms. Neither one of those choices is a good choice. They are bad choices, both of them. That is what you call bondage, when you no longer have good choices to make. The consequence of making a moral choice or a wrong moral choice, when you're given the choice between right and wrong, is you lose the good choices. So now, where before you have um, perhaps two good choices and two bad choices, then you choose something wrong. Well, all of a sudden, one of your good choices is eliminated. You can still repent and go for the other one, but it's much more difficult and much more costly. And then perhaps even if you continue to make wrong choices, even that option disappears. And so there's no good choices. And on the same time, if we continue to make good choices, then the bad choices or the wrong choices will eliminate themselves. Now, this is not to say that there cannot be pain and suffering and difficulties in people's lives. There can be, of course, even when they're righteous. There can be bad things that happen, and great evil can come upon people even when they are doing all the right things. So I'm not saying that this will eliminate, need for making moral choices. But I'm saying that when you do make wise and good choices, that the number of good choices increases at the same time, and the ability to make good choices increases. And that is when you have true freedom, and when you have the ability to act for yourselves and not to be acted upon. That is when you can say, I want to do this because it's what I want to do, and I am free to do that. That's very different from the person who has either the choice of robbing a liquor store and feeding their family, or not feeding their family. Those are two terrible choices, um, and there's no good choice amongst them. So think for yourself when you make a choice. Think of what's the moral choice, and if there is a question of a good choice versus a wrong choice, pick the good choice. Pick the right choice. Do the moral thing. And if you do the moral thing, your life will become more free, because the ability of you to make more right and good choices becomes more evident. And you become free to act for yourselves and not to be acted upon. And that is true freedom. When you not only have one good choice and one bad choice, but when you have 5 good choices. That's when you are free. That's our lesson for today. Ask me anything. Annika asked me, why aren't you a millionaire? Because in Utah, you said that you would be millionaire within a year. That's a good choice. That's a good question. This was when I was working on a startup, and my thought was to take this big, and that within a year we could, have a company that's worth at least $1 million, of which I'd be the majority owner. That was the plan. That was the good. that was one possibility, but the other possibility of that was I could fail miserably and be broke. And what happened is the company failed miserably, and we were broke. That was a risk that I took. And if I ask myself and I look back and I say, was that the right choice to make? And I don't think that was the wrong choice to make. I committed to it, and I thought that was the best opportunity for me at the moment, and the greatest opportunity to actually provide for my family. But I do not pretend to say that I am above having bad things happen to me just because I am a moral person, or because I strive to be good. And by striving to be it, I basically admit that I am a flawed character, and that I don't always act according to my ideals. Um, but I will. But that does not mean I don't argue for those ideals. But what I was saying is that there's no harm in actually taking a risk, as long as you understand what those risks are, and the people with you are comfortable and taking those risks. I think if I'm honest, it was difficult to have to struggle, just because doing a startup takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of money, and you can come down to your last bit and say, okay, what am I going to do now? Um, I don't have any money left. Anyway, those are all wonderful. I don't want to say wonderful questions to have, because of course it's always better not to have those concerns. But at the same time, I think everybody should feel the bite of being broke in their life at least once or twice, because it really teaches them the importance of providing for yourself and sustaining yourself. And almost everyone has the opportunity as they're a student to have to struggle to say, you know what, I only have $500 in my bank account. What am I going to do? And that's not a bad thing to do. That's not a bad thing to go through. Um, I went through it later in life. I went through it earlier in life, and I went through it later in life. And if I could change things and turn back time, I might do that. But at the same time, I am where I am now because of the questions and decisions I made. And I remember just thinking to myself, if everything would have been swimmingly throughout my life, I might be sitting in the same spot that I'm in right now. And I've been incredibly blessed over the last few years to actually be able to make up and catch up for a lot of that missed time, and going through a lot of that 401k and stuff like that. So I consider myself a blessed person. And Annika, thank you for your question. And this is our fireside chat. Thanks everyone, and look forward to next week. Bye bye.